Chen's fingers were stained with acrylic paint and coffee grounds, the signature marks of her double life. By day, she served lattes at Grind Coffee and stocked shelves at the campus bookstore. By night, she transformed discarded objects into breathtaking mixed-media sculptures that spoke to the soul in ways words never could. At 28, she had perfected the art of surviving on 4 hours of sleep and instant ramen, all for the chance to create something that mattered. Her cramped studio apartment overflowed with her creations. A series of mirrors embedded with family photographs that reflected fractured relationships, sculptures made from childhood toys that explored the loss of innocence, and installations incorporating audio recordings that gave voice to the silenced. Each piece told a story of human connection, pain, and resilience. Maya's work had been featured in several small galleries, earning critical praise and a growing following among art enthusiasts who recognized her unique vision. The Harrison Foundation grant represented everything Maya had worked toward: $50,000 and a year-long mentorship program that had launched the careers of dozens of now famous artists. The application process was rigorous, requiring not just a portfolio, but also character references from respected professionals who could vouch for the applicant's dedication and potential. Maya stared at the application form spread across her paint-splattered desk, her heart sinking as she read the requirements again. She needed someone with gravitas, someone whose word carried weight in professional circles. There was really only one person who fit that description: her father. Richard Chen had built his reputation as one of the city's most successful corporate lawyers, known for his meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment to his clients. He was a member of the prestigious Meridian Club, where he networked with judges, politicians, and business leaders over expensive wine and carefully curated art exhibitions. His word was his bond in professional circles, exactly what Maya needed to legitimize her application. The conversation in his mahogany-paneled office went exactly as Maya had feared it would. A character reference? Richard didn't look up from the contract he was reviewing, his Mont Blanc pen moving steadily across the pages. For what? The Harrison Foundation grant. It's a major opportunity, Dad. $50,000 in Maya. He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of disappointment and exasperation. We've discussed this. Your art is a lovely hobby, but it's gone too far. You're 28 years old, working minimum wage jobs, living in that tiny apartment. When are you going to get serious about life? Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times growing up when her report card showed A's in everything except the subjects that really mattered to him. This is serious, Dad. My work is getting recognition. I've sold pieces, I've been featured in galleries. Small galleries, he interrupted. Coffee shops with pretentious names. That's not a career, Maya. That's playing artist. The words stung because they echoed her own late-night fears, the voice that whispered doubt when she was eating ramen for the 5th day in a row, or when her back ached from her second job. But seeing her father's dismissive expression, Maya felt something harden inside her chest. I just need one letter, she said quietly. One letter saying that I'm dedicated and committed to my work. Richard set down his pen and leaned back in his leather chair. I can't do that, Maya. I can't put my name behind something I don't believe in. You need to hear this: art isn't going to pay your bills or give you security. It's time to consider law school, or business school, or any school that will give you a real profession. Maya left his office with shaking hands and a rejection that felt like a physical blow, but she was determined not to let his refusal stop her. She found other references: her former professor, the gallery owner who had first shown her work, a collector who had purchased 3 of her pieces. Their letters were glowing, full of praise for her unique vision and unwavering dedication to her craft. 3 weeks later, the rejection letter arrived. Maya read it twice, her disbelief growing with each word. Despite having what the committee called an exceptional portfolio and strong artistic vision, they had concerns about her long-term commitment to the artistic process and her professional maturity. The phrases felt familiar, uncomfortably so. It was Jessica Torres, a friend who worked in the foundation's administrative office, who finally told Maya the truth over coffee a week later. I shouldn't be telling you this, Jessica said, glancing around the crowded cafe, but someone called about your application, a family member. They said they were concerned about your dedication, that you might not be mature enough to handle the responsibility of the grant. Maya's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. A family member, they wouldn't give their name, but they claimed to know you well. Said you had a history of abandoning projects when they got difficult. The committee, well, they took it seriously. That kind of inside information carries a lot of weight. The cafe seemed to spin around Maya as the pieces fell into place. The familiar phrases in the rejection letter, the anonymous family member, the deliberate sabotage disguised as concern. Her father hadn't just refused to help her, he had actively worked to destroy her chances. That night, Maya sat in her studio, surrounded by years of her work, each piece a testament to her dedication and perseverance. She had never abandoned a project in her life. She had worked 3 jobs to afford art supplies, had sacrificed sleep and social life and financial security for her art, and her own father had painted her as frivolous and uncommitted to the very people who could have changed her life. The betrayal cut deeper than any rejection letter ever could. It wasn't just about the grant, it was about the realization that the person who should have been her biggest supporter had become her greatest obstacle. Maya looked at her reflection in one of her mirror installations, seeing not just her own face, but the fractured relationship it represented. Something cold and determined settled in her chest. If her father wanted to play games with her career, she would show him exactly what kind of artist and what kind of daughter he had underestimated. Maya waited 3 days before confronting her father, 3 days during which she replayed every conversation they'd ever had about her art, every dismissive comment, every time he'd changed the subject when she tried to share her successes. The pieces of a larger pattern were falling into place, and she needed to know the full extent of his interference. She found him in his home office on Saturday morning, the same mahogany-paneled sanctuary where he'd refused to write her recommendation letter. This time she didn't sit in the chair across from his desk like a supplicant seeking approval. She stood, her arms crossed, and waited for him to acknowledge her presence. "Maya, if this is about the grant again, you called them." Her voice was steady, controlled. "You didn't just refuse to help me, you actively sabotaged my application." Richard's pen paused for just a moment, long enough for Maya to see the truth in his hesitation. When he looked up, his expression held no remorse, only the same paternalistic concern that had suffocated her dreams for years. "I did what I thought was best for you," he said, as if discussing a business decision. "The committee needed to understand that you're not ready for that kind of responsibility." $50,000, Maya, that's serious money for serious artists. "I am a serious artist." The words came out louder than she intended, years of suppressed frustration bleeding through. "I've been creating and selling my work for 6 years. I've had shows, I've built a reputation." "In coffee shops," he interrupted, "in small galleries that nobody's heard of. Maya, I've been protecting you from a much harder fall. Do you know what happens to artists who get grants like that? The pressure, the expectations, most of them burn out within 2 years." Maya stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man who had shaped her entire life through fear disguised as protection. "How long?" she asked quietly. "What? How long have you been doing this? Sabotaging my applications, undermining my opportunities?" Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Because this isn't the first time, is it? The Riverside Gallery residency that I was almost selected for. The Arts Council Fellowship where I made it to the final round, but didn't quite make the cut." For the first time in the conversation, Richard looked uncomfortable. He set down his pen and folded his hands on the desk, the gesture of a lawyer preparing to make his case. "I made a few phone calls over the years," he admitted, "to people I know in the art world. I expressed my concerns about your commitment level, your tendency to get distracted by artistic pursuits, instead of focusing on building a stable future." Maya felt the room tilt around her. "A few phone calls." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dad, do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea how many opportunities you've stolen from me?" "I've saved you from a disappointment," he said firmly. "I've saved you from a life of poverty and instability." "Maya, you're talented, but talent isn't enough. The art world is brutal, and I won't watch my daughter destroy her life chasing an impossible dream." "It wasn't your choice to make." The words exploded out of her, carrying decades of resentment. "Those were my dreams to chase, my failures to learn from, my successes to earn. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your father." The finality in his voice, the absolute certainty that he knew what was best for her, crystallized something in Maya's mind. She had spent her entire adult life seeking his approval, modifying her dreams to fit his vision of respectability, and apologizing for wanting something he couldn't understand. She had let his voice become the inner critic that questioned her worth as an artist. "No more." "You're right about one thing," Maya said, her voice now calm with a dangerous clarity. The art world is brutal, but not in the way you think. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. I hope it was worth it, Dad. All those phone calls, all that effort to keep me small. I hope it was worth what you're about to lose. Richard frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Maya smiled, and for the first time in the conversation, she felt powerful. You'll find out. As she walked to her car, Maya's mind was already working, planning. Her father had used his connections, his reputation, his insider access to the art world to sabotage her career. He had wielded his power like a weapon, all while claiming to protect her. Now it was time to show him what real power looked like, the power of truth, of authentic artistic expression, and of a daughter who refused to remain invisible any longer. Maya thought of the Meridian Club, where her father spent his evenings surrounded by the art he claimed to understand, networking with the elite who validated his sense of importance. She wondered how he would feel when his carefully constructed world was forced to confront the reality of what he had tried to destroy. Maya spent the first week after the confrontation in what she called her research phase, a methodical investigation that would have made her lawyer father proud if he could have seen past his own blind spots to appreciate the strategic mind he had helped create. She started with the Meridian Club itself, studying its website, social media presence, and archived newsletters. The club's annual spring exhibition was their crown jewel, a carefully curated show that drew collectors, critics, and society figures from across the region. This year's theme, announced just 2 months prior, was family dynamics, art as personal truth. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Elena Vasquez, the club's art curator, had built a reputation for discovering emerging artists whose work challenged comfortable assumptions. Her Instagram feed showed a preference for pieces that sparked conversation, work that made viewers uncomfortable in productive ways. Maya studied Elena's past exhibitions, noting the themes that resonated: authenticity over politeness, truth over convention, emotional honesty over social comfort. Perfect. Maya's plan began to crystallize as she walked through her apartment studio, seeing her work with new eyes. Years of creating art about family relationships, about the masks people wore, about the difference between public faces and private truths. It was all preparation for this moment. The series she would create for the Meridian Club would be called Invisible Wounds, an exploration of family betrayal disguised as love, of protection that became suffocation, of support that transformed into sabotage. Every piece would draw from her relationship with her father, but the themes were universal enough to resonate with anyone who had ever felt diminished by those who claimed to know what was best for them. The centerpiece would be Father's Voice, an interactive installation where visitors could sit in a comfortable chair, put on noise-canceling headphones, and listen to actual recordings of conversations between Maya and her father. She had started recording their phone calls years ago, initially as a way to process her emotions after particularly difficult conversations. Now those recordings would become art. Maya spent hours combing through the audio files, selecting the moments that best captured her father's systematic dismissal of her dreams. His voice saying, "Maya, you need to be realistic." Her younger self responding, "But Dad, I sold 3 pieces last month." His reply, "That's not real income, sweetheart. That's hobby money." The recordings were legal. She had informed him years ago that she sometimes recorded their calls for her own reflection, and he had dismissed it as another of her artistic quirks. He had unknowingly given her permission to document his own methods of control. Working 18-hour days, Maya began creating the most honest work of her career. The Lawyer's Daughter was a mixed media sculpture incorporating legal documents, copies of cease and desist letters, contract drafts, official letterheads, twisted into the shape of a girl's silhouette, her mouth covered by a gag made from rejection letters. The piece spoke to the way legal language could be weaponized against those it claimed to protect. Conditional Love featured a series of mirrors that only reflected the viewer's image when they stood in positions of supplication, kneeling, bowing, or reaching upward as if begging. When they stood tall and confident, the mirrors showed only darkness. Maya had spent 3 weeks perfecting the optical illusion, using principles of physics to create a metaphor for how love could be withheld until compliance was achieved. For the committee, Maya created life-sized figures made from papier-mâché and official documents, each figure wearing a mask made from grant applications and recommendation letters. The figures sat around a conference table, and hidden speakers played a loop of voices, discussing concerns about commitment and questions of maturity, all phrases taken directly from her rejection letters over the years. The most technically challenging piece was Sabotage, an installation that appeared to be a beautiful garden maze. Visitors would enter expecting to find their way to the center, but the path was designed to lead them in circles, with hidden speakers whispering discouraging words at key decision points. "Are you sure this is the right way? Maybe you should turn back. This path isn't meant for someone like you." Only visitors who ignored the whispered doubts and pushed through would discover that the maze was actually just a few strategically placed mirrors creating the illusion of complexity. Maya worked with an intensity that surprised even her. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination, pouring years of suppressed anger and hurt onto canvases and into sculptures. Each piece was a confession, an accusation, and a declaration of independence. The application to exhibit at the Meridian Club required careful strategy. Maya couldn't use her real name. Her father would recognize it immediately and potentially interfere again. Instead, she applied as M. Martinez, using her mother's maiden name and listing a friend's address as her studio location. Her portfolio, photographed by a professional friend in exchange for a small sculpture, looked stunning in the carefully designed submission package. Elena Vasquez's response came within a week. An email that made Maya's hands shake as she read it. "Martinez, your work is exactly what we've been looking for. The raw honesty and technical sophistication of Invisible Wounds perfectly captures our exhibition theme. The way you've transformed personal pain into universal commentary is extraordinary. We would be honored to feature your work as the centerpiece of our spring exhibition. When can we schedule a studio visit?" Maya stared at the email for a full minute before the reality sank in. She was going to exhibit at the Meridian Club. Her work would hang in the same space where her father socialized with his colleagues, where he sought validation and respect from his peers. He would see her art, hear his own voice played back to a room full of the people whose opinions he valued most. He would finally understand the cost of his protection, displayed in a way that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she began her reply to Elena. The plan was working perfectly, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when her father walked into that gallery, expecting to see carefully curated art that reinforced his worldview, and instead found himself face to face with the daughter he had tried so hard to keep invisible. She couldn't wait to see his expression when he realized that sometimes the most powerful revenge came wrapped in a beautiful frame and hung on a wall for everyone to see. The Meridian Club's spring exhibition opened on a Thursday evening in April, with the kind of understated elegance that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Maya arrived early, watching from across the street as caterers arranged champagne flutes and members began filtering in, their conversations a blend of business deals and cultural observations that they believed demonstrated their sophistication. Elena Vasquez had positioned Invisible Wounds perfectly throughout the main gallery space. Visitors encountered Conditional Love first, the mirrors that only reflected confident viewers as darkness. Maya watched through the window as well-dressed patrons hesitated, confused by their own disappearance, some unconsciously shifting into more deferential postures to see themselves again. The centerpiece, Father's Voice, commanded the center of the room. Elena had created a perfect viewing environment, comfortable leather chairs positioned around the sculpture, with high-quality headphones hanging from elegant stands. A small placard invited visitors to experience the artist's truth through intimate audio testimony. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Incredible response already. Critics from 3 major publications here, and the Times art blogger is doing a live review. Your work is the talk of the evening." But Maya wasn't watching the critics or art blogger. She was waiting for one specific viewer. Richard Chen arrived at precisely 7:30, as he did for every Meridian Club event. Maya recognized his confident stride, the way he paused to greet other members with practiced charm, his eyes scanning the room to assess the social landscape before committing to any particular conversation. She watched him accept a glass of champagne and begin his usual circuit of the gallery, stopping first at pieces that seemed safely conventional. He nodded appreciatively at a landscape series, spent several minutes discussing technique with another member in front of abstract paintings that challenged no one. Then he approached Conditional Love. Maya held her breath as her father stood before the mirrors, his confident posture reflected back at him clearly. She saw him lean forward, trying to understand the mechanism that made some viewers disappear while others remained visible. He stepped back, shifted his stance, experimented with different positions. When he accidentally moved into a more submissive posture and watched himself vanish, his frown deepened. Interesting piece, isn't it? Maya heard Eleanor Whitman, the club president, approach her father. The artist calls it an exploration of how love can be conditional on submission, makes you think about power dynamics in relationships. Richard's response was polite but dismissive. A bit heavy-handed, don't you think? Good art should elevate, not analyze. Maya smiled grimly. Her father was already uncomfortable, and he hadn't even reached the main event yet. She watched him move through the exhibition, his discomfort growing with each piece. At the committee he paused longer, listening to the recorded voices discussing concerns about artists' maturity and commitment. Several other club members had gathered around the installation, and Maya caught fragments of their conversation. So realistic, like you're actually in the room. The way bureaucracy can crush creativity makes you wonder about the stories behind rejection letters. Richard's expression grew increasingly strained. The voices in the installation were too familiar, the phrases too specific. Maya watched him pull out his phone, perhaps to check if he had any meetings to escape to, but Eleanor Whitman approached him again. Richard, you must see the centerpiece. It's extraordinary, such raw honesty about family relationships. The artist has created something truly powerful about parental influence on artistic expression. Maya saw her father's face pale slightly, but social expectations required him to follow Eleanor toward father's voice. A small crowd had gathered around the installation, with several people waiting their turn to experience the audio component. Judge Patricia Hawkins, someone Richard had worked with on several cases, was just removing the headphones as they approached. "My God," she said, her voice shaken. The pain in that artist's voice and the father's responses, it's devastating how people can sabotage the ones they claim to love. Richard accepted the headphones from Elena Vasquez with hands that Maya noticed were slightly trembling. "This is our most ambitious piece," Elena explained. The artist recorded actual conversations with her father over several years. It's a raw examination of how family members can undermine each other in the name of protection. Maya watched her father's face as he put on the headphones and pressed play. She knew exactly what he was hearing, his own voice from 3 years ago, telling her that art wasn't a real career, that she needed to grow up and face reality. Then her younger self trying to explain her passion, her dedication, her small success. Then his voice again, more condescending. "Maya, sweetheart, I know you think this is important, but I can't support something that's going to hurt you in the long run." Richard's face went white. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the crowd of his peers, all waiting to experience what he was experiencing. Judge Hawkins, Eleanor Whitman, the Prescott family who controlled half the city's real estate development, the arts columnist from the Tribune, all of them would hear his voice, his words, his systematic dismissal of his daughter's dream. Maya saw him reach for the headphone controls, perhaps to stop the audio, but Elena was standing right there watching his reaction with professional interest. Social convention trapped him in his chair as his own voice continued to play back to him, each dismissive comment now stripped of its paternal justification and revealed as simple cruelty. The audio shifted to a more recent conversation, the one where Maya had asked for the grant recommendation letter. Every member of this room would hear him refuse to support his daughter's application, would hear him call her art a hobby that's gone too far. But they wouldn't hear the part that came next, his secret phone calls to sabotage her opportunities. Maya had saved that revelation for the final piece in the series, a small placard she'd positioned near the installation's exit that listed additional works by Martinez and mentioned the Sabotage series featuring documentation of systematic interference with artistic opportunities by family members claiming to offer protection. Richard removed the headphones abruptly, his hands shaking now. Elena immediately approached him with professional curiosity. "Powerful, isn't it? The artist's technique of using real audio creates such authenticity. What did you think of the father's perspective?" Some viewers find him sympathetic, a parent trying to protect his child from disappointment. Others see him as controlling, even manipulative. What was your reading? Maya watched her father's mouth open and close wordlessly. Around him, his social circle waited for his expert opinion on art, on family dynamics, on the complex psychology of parental love and control. These were people who respected his judgment, who sought his advice, who had never seen him anything less than articulate and confident. Richard began, then stopped. "The voice is very familiar, isn't it?" Eleanor Whitman joined the conversation. "So, makes you think about your own family relationships. The artist has really captured something universal about how we communicate with the people closest to us." Maya saw her father's eyes scanning the room wildly, looking for an escape route, but more club members were approaching, drawn by the animated discussion around the centerpiece installation. Soon he would be surrounded by everyone who mattered in his professional and social world, all of them eager to discuss the powerful art that featured his own voice as an example of family dysfunction. The trap was closing perfectly, and Maya hadn't even revealed herself yet. Maya took a deep breath and walked through the Meridian Club's front doors. She had changed into her best dress, a simple black piece that her mother had bought her for gallery openings. Elegant enough to fit in with the club's clientele, but distinctive enough to be memorable. Her hair was pulled back to reveal the small silver earrings she'd made from fragments of her first rejected grant application, a detail only she would understand. Elena Vasquez spotted her immediately and approached with barely contained excitement. "And Martinez, you came after all. I wasn't sure you would. So many artists are nervous about seeing their work in public for the first time." "I needed to see it," Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Especially the audience response, she let Elena guide her toward the crowd gathered around Father's Voice, where her father still stood trapped in conversation with Judge Hawkins and Eleanor Whitman. As they approached, Maya caught fragments of the discussion. Such authenticity in the father's voice makes you wonder what kind of man could be so dismissive. The daughter's pain is palpable. Richard looked up and saw Maya approaching. The color drained from his face completely. For a moment she thought he might faint. "Richard?" Eleanor noticed his expression. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maya stopped directly in front of her father, close enough that everyone in the gathered crowd could see them both clearly. "Hello, Dad." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya watched as recognition dawned on the faces around them. Eleanor's eyes widening, Judge Hawkins' sharp intake of breath, the scattered murmurs as people began connecting the dots. Maya Richards' voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for my exhibition," she said, clearly her voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly quiet gallery. "I'm M. Martinez. These are my pieces." Eleanor gasped. "Your father," the voice on the recording, "is my father yet?" Maya kept her eyes on Richard, watching as 20 years of careful reputation building crumbled in real time. "Every word you heard him say about my art, about my career, about my maturity and commitment," he said, "all of that to me, his own daughter." Richard found his voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Maya, please, please what?" Her voice rose slightly, carrying the weight of years of suppressed anger. "Please don't tell them how you sabotaged my grant application. Please don't mention the phone calls you made to committees, expressing your concerns about my dedication. Please don't let them know that the successful lawyer they all respect has spent years systematically destroying his daughter's career opportunity." "You're being dramatic," Richard said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Maya's voice cut through the room like a blade. "From success, from recognition, from the career I've built, despite your interference." She gestured to the crowd around them, many of whom were now openly staring. "Look around, Dad. Look at how people are responding to my work. Look at the critics taking notes, the collectors asking Elena for my contact information. This is what you tried to prevent." Judge Hawkins stepped forward, her expression stern. "Richard, is this true? Did you interfere with your daughter's applications?" Richard's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Maya could see him calculating, trying to find a way to spin this that would preserve his reputation, but the evidence was overwhelming. His own voice was still playing on loop in the headphones behind them, condemning him with every word. "I made some phone calls," he finally admitted. "I expressed concerns. You lied about me." Maya interrupted. "You told committees I was immature, uncommitted, that I abandoned projects when they got difficult. You made up stories about my character to people who had the power to change my life." Eleanor Whitman's face had gone pale. "Richard, how could you?" "I was protecting her." The words exploded out of him, drawing the attention of everyone in the gallery. "Do you have any idea how brutal the art world is? How many talented people fail? I couldn't watch my daughter destroy her life chasing an impossible dream." "It wasn't impossible," Maya said quietly, but her voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "Look around, this is proof that it wasn't impossible. The only thing that made it difficult was you." Richard looked around the room, seeing his professional and social peers staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. These were people who had trusted his judgment, who had valued his opinions. Now they were seeing him as a man who had betrayed his own daughter. "Maya," he said desperately, We can discuss this privately. No, her voice was firm, final. We've had enough private discussions. Every private conversation we've ever had has been you telling me what I couldn't do, what I shouldn't want, what I wasn't capable of achieving. This is the first honest conversation we've ever had, and it's happening here because this is where you chose to exercise your power over my life. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered around them. My father used his connections, his reputation, his access to your world to sabotage my career. He called committees and convinced them I wasn't worth the risk. He made sure I was rejected from opportunities that could have changed my life, and he did it all while telling me he loved me, while claiming he was protecting me. Maya, please. Richard reached for her arm, but she stepped back. Don't touch me. The words came out harder than she intended, but she didn't soften them. You've had your hands on my life for too long already. Elena Vasquez had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now she stepped forward. Miss Martinez, Maya, I need you to know something. I've been following your work for over 2 years. I specifically sought you out for this exhibition because I believe you're one of the most promising emerging artists in the region. Whatever obstacles you've faced, whatever interference you've encountered, your talent has been clear to those of us who matter in the art world. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you. And Richard, Elena continued, her voice carrying a chill that made several people in the crowd step back. I think you should leave. Now, Richard looked around the room one final time, seeing his carefully constructed world in ruins. His daughter's art surrounded him, testament to the talent he had tried to suppress. His peers looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. The reputation he had spent decades building was cracking apart with each passing second. Maya, he said one last time, his voice breaking. I'm your father. Yes, she said simply. You are, and that's what makes this so unforgivable. Richard turned and walked toward the exit, his steps unsteady. Maya watched him go, feeling a complex mixture of triumph and grief. She had won, her art was acclaimed, her father's sabotage was exposed, her career was launched in a way that no grant could have achieved. But she had also lost something, the fantasy of a father who had loved her enough to support her dreams. As the crowd began to disperse, people approaching Maya with congratulations and business cards, she realized that this was only the beginning. The real work, rebuilding her life without the shadow of her father's interference, was just starting. But for the first time in her adult life, Maya felt truly free to begin. The immediate aftermath was electric. Within hours of Richard's humiliated exit from the Meridian Club, Maya's phone was buzzing with calls from galleries, collectors, and journalists. Elena had given several impromptu interviews to the art critics present, describing Maya's work as a masterpiece of artistic courage and the most honest examination of family trauma I've seen in decades. By the next morning, photos of father's voice were trending on art blogs across the internet. The story had everything: family drama, artistic vindication, and the delicious irony of a daughter's revenge, served in the very institution where her father sought social validation. 3 major galleries reached out before noon, and the Harrison Foundation, the same organization that had rejected her application, sent a formal letter inviting her to reapply for their next cycle. Maya spent the weekend fielding calls and emails, her small apartment suddenly feeling like mission control for a career that had transformed overnight. But beneath the professional excitement was a strange emptiness. She had achieved everything she'd dreamed of, but the victory felt incomplete without someone to share it with who truly understood the journey. On Monday morning, she heard footsteps on the stairs leading to her studio apartment. Heavy, familiar footsteps that paused outside her door for a full minute before finally knocking. Richard stood in her doorway looking older than she remembered, his usually perfect posture slumped with exhaustion. May I come in? Maya studied his face, seeing none of the defensive anger or paternalistic concern that had characterized their previous encounters. Instead, she saw something she'd never witnessed before: humility. 5 minutes, she said, stepping aside. Richard entered her apartment and stopped, his eyes taking in what he was truly seeing for the first time. The walls were covered with years of her work, pieces he'd dismissed as hobbies, creations he'd never bothered to examine closely. Sculptures filled every available surface, their complexity and craftsmanship undeniable. Awards and letters of recognition were framed modestly in one corner, achievements she'd never mentioned, because she'd learned he wouldn't listen. He moved slowly through the space, pausing at each piece, his expression shifting from surprise to understanding to something that looked like grief. When he reached a sculpture she'd created 3 years ago, a piece about feeling invisible in your own family, he stopped and stared for a long time. My God, Maya, he whispered. How long have you been this good? Since always, she said quietly. You just never look. Richard turned to face her, his composure finally cracking. I've made a terrible mistake. Not just Thursday night, everything. Years of mistakes. His voice broke slightly. I was so afraid you'd fail, so terrified you'd end up struggling financially, that I convinced myself I was protecting you. But I was really protecting myself from having to watch you take risks I was too scared to take myself. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of anger she'd carried for so long it had become part of her identity. Dad, let me finish, he said, holding up a trembling hand. I sabotaged your opportunities because I couldn't bear the thought of you being disappointed. But what I really couldn't bear was being proven wrong about your talent. If you succeeded, it would mean I'd been wrong about everything, about what constitutes a meaningful life, about what deserves respect, about what my daughter was capable of. He gestured around the room. Looking at all this, I realize I wasn't just wrong, I was blind. Maya sank into her desk chair, suddenly exhausted. I needed you to believe in me, she said. Not control me, not protect me from failure, just believe in me. I know that now. Richard's voice was barely audible. I know I've lost the right to ask for anything, but I'm asking anyway. Can we start over? Not as father who knows best and daughter who needs guidance, but as two adults who are trying to understand each other. Maya looked at this man who had shaped her entire life, who had been both her greatest obstacle and inadvertently, the source of her greatest artistic inspiration. The anger was still there, but it no longer felt like it was burning her from the inside. I can't just forgive you, she said finally. Not yet, but I'm willing to try something new. Over the following months, their relationship began to change in ways Maya had never imagined possible. Richard started attending her exhibitions, not as a critic looking for flaws but as someone genuinely trying to understand her vision. He asked questions about her techniques, her inspirations, her artistic process. For the first time in her adult life, Maya felt seen by her father. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Richard still occasionally slipped into his old patterns of offering unsolicited advice or expressing concern about her financial stability. But now Maya had the confidence to set boundaries, to say, I didn't ask for advice or I need you to trust my judgment on this. More importantly, she no longer needed his approval to feel valid as an artist. The Meridian Club exhibition had launched her career in ways she'd never anticipated. She received a full fellowship from the Harrison Foundation, had her work acquired by 2 major museums, and was invited to show at galleries across the country. 6 months after the exhibition, Maya stood in her new, larger studio space, preparing for her first solo show at a prestigious downtown gallery. Richard knocked on the doorframe, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need a break, he said, offering her one of the cups. Maya accepted the coffee and gestured to the paintings covering the walls. What do you think? Richard studied the new work pieces about healing, about forgiveness, about the complex love between family members who have hurt each other. I think, he said slowly, that you're the most talented person I know, and I think I'm incredibly lucky that you're my daughter, even if I haven't always deserved you. Maya smiled, the first completely genuine smile she'd shared with her father in years. You're learning. I'm trying, he said. I'm trying to be the father you deserved all along. Maya looked around her studio, filled with work that told the story of her journey from silenced daughter to empowered artist. The path had been longer and more painful than it needed to be, but it had led her here to a career built on her own terms, to art that spoke her truth and to a relationship with her father that was finally based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. We're both learning, she said, and that's enough for now.